Arena shown what they cooked with spears, and though it seems 8 of them were certainly impressive in some way, shape or form, it cannot be understated that Warrior got shafted. I waited to make sure emotions won't cloud my judgment, and put Spear through the same lens of mild criticism I put every existing Warrior weapon through across my time on YouTube. Of course, I'm working with incomplete data, making educated guesses based off what was shown in the stream, which might be misleading, and that's why I put extra caution into this video, as Warrior mains are already voicing their disappointment on forums, and my goal is not to stoke the fire, but to provide as accurate and well-informed explanation of why Warrior mains are unhappy as possible. With that already stated, I'll first point out a noticeable dissonance. In the same showcase that brought us Ellie's etchings and their bombastic visuals, Guardian's beautiful new symbol and VFX in general, Engineer's lightning VFX, and his spear bloody assembling before him, and not to mention Mesmer's fancy flower or even the animal spirits accompanying ranger skills, there is no denying that Warrior's spear look ridiculously low budget in comparison. And I don't just mean the lack of bombastic effects. I'm saying that knowing they will show off spears to the public on a live stream, they should have run those things through QA to weed out any visual bugs, especially if they happen consistently 10 out of 10 times the skill is used. You can't tell me that this looks like a finished bug-free product. And no, that is not nitpicking. That's their bloody expansion feature they're trying to sell us the expansion with. Making it look good on their own bloody promotional material is the least they could bloody do. Another episode of Arena Cuts Corners on QA aside, let's get through actual skills and what they do. We of course haven't got the thing in our hands yet, but we got the tooltips, and based off those we can make pretty accurate assumptions. So let us dissect this thing. Mighty Throw. You throw a spear, it breaks, hits the more additional targets the closer you are to initial one. 900 range. Maiming Spear. You throw a spear, it deals damage, cripples, and then explodes. AoE of explosion is the bigger the closer you are to it. 900 range. Spear Swipe. You dodge backwards and then knock people away. They didn't even make it a cone like Mesmer's Greatsword 5 is. It is a bloody Dragon Trigger reach, just without the reach and with knockback instead. Disrupting Throw. Literally disrupting stab, but 1200 range. And adjusted for bigger cooldown, with some immobilize. Spear Marshal's Support. A delayed damage, with delay changing, depending on range. Also 900 range. Core Burst Harrier Toss. You evade and throw a spear that deals damage. Brilliant. 900 range. Primal Burst. Wild Throw. You throw 7 spears, which at least apply vulnerability, so there's something besides just damage. Also 900 range. From that already we can see just how poorly thought out this weapon is. It has not a single boon in its entirety. Grand total of 3 conditions, 2 if you're not playing Berserker. Its only skill with 1200 range is the dedicated interrupt, and the only mobility it has is hard-coded to propel you backwards. In one singular word, it's a mess. Not to mention, look at these range thresholds. Someone went into a meeting about this and declared, let's make a ranged weapon and make it lose effectiveness after fucking 300 range. And somebody else replied with, yeah, that's a great idea, and it totally won't look like a direct insult to the end user. To anyone who needs visualization, Linebreaker has a radius of 300, which means it's a good measurement tool for how close to enemy you have to be not to lose effectiveness. This, as a concept, is just stupid. You could be fighting a guy on a side note, with both of you contesting it, and still not hitting at maximum power, because that's the range you're losing effectiveness at. Why do we even make the weapon ranged if we are going to handicap its effectiveness this early? All this is going to do is make Spear feel bad to use at every range being ranged matters at. However, the effects of Spear that diminish with range isn't damage. It's number of targets on skill 1, size of secondary AoE on skill 2, and delay on skill 5. All of these are balance-wise absolutely stupid. First, auto attack. Let's assume I'm on an average strike mission or raid, doing my best job as DPS. Look at all these additional targets I could have been hitting. Incredible! Furthermore, this might look impressive on stationary golems set up specifically to showcase maximum potential of small AoEs, but in practice, you can't even expect to reliably hit both a ranger and his pet, or a mechanist and his crime against humanity, or two different players simultaneously. These will consistently hit more than one target, either when you're fighting a minion spam build, all of which are comically bad, or when pressuring someone off of a revive, where many weapons let you do the same. Multi-hit on Spear Auto will only make any sort of difference in open world, fractals, and the combined 2 fights in all 7 raids when you get flooded with melee trash mobs, which is the same exact situation where every warrior's melee weapon already does the job better. Even in Zeg fights in World v World, you wouldn't get much value from this AoE, as you'd have to deal with all the projectile denial tools enemy has anyway. And if you're using Signet of Might to bypass these tools, Rifle gives you better way to capitalize on this window of opportunity. There might have been no range scaling on this thing whatsoever, and it wouldn't make much difference balance-wise, as it will affect Warrior's damage output or adrenaline generation only in extreme edge case scenarios. Henceforth my question, why does it even lose effectiveness with range at all? Why did we come up with a mechanic specifically for the purpose of making Warrior's Spear feel worth to use? And why did we invest time, effort, and money into making it? Not to mention, nothing thematically fits the guy that's supposed to be good with weapons less than repeatedly destroying his own bloody weapon. Not only it is the opposite of what class is supposed to represent, but also makes the weapon feel worse to play without affecting its effectiveness in 99.9% of cases. You made up a mechanic just so you can say you made a mechanic, without considering that by doing so you will make the game worse for everyone. Speaking of, differing size of AoE on Spear 2 will not affect PvE, as missing the boss hitbox in most encounters requires conscious effort. It won't affect World v World Zeg fights either, as missing the Zeg also requires conscious effort, but it will make PvP engagements obnoxious for both parties involved, especially on side notes. You see, from further than 600 range, this skill's secondary strike has radius of 120, which makes it virtually impossible to land on a moving target. But within 300 range, it is 240, which makes it virtually impossible to miss, even against moving target. 240 radius is almost enough to cover 80% of the node you're fighting for. Now, if you ever fought a Spellbreaker on a side node, consider all the annoying shite he's going to do, but also add to it him dropping AoEs the size of the node you're fighting on every 5 seconds and having an option to completely ignore your attempts at kiting him because he has ranged CC now. But more on Spellbreaker later, we still have skill 5 to talk about. Marshal's support is probably the dumbest way you can implement a varying power depending on range type of mechanic. Damage of this skill doesn't change, but delay at which it starts doing damage changes. Now, not just the warrior, but everyone has to pay attention to his stupid spacing game. Imagine you just got marked. Now, you'll start receiving damage in half a second, full second, or second and a half from now. You better not mistime that dodge, because there's 7 reasons not to waiting for you. And if Warrior so much as presses buttons in your general direction as the timer is ticking, Here go both your dodges and you may still take damage. Not to mention, indicator for this skill doesn't give you any idea how long it will take for the damage to arrive. And difference between 300 and 301 range, or 600 and 601 range, which are the range thresholds at which timer changes, are nowhere near well enough telegraphed for you to be able to tell the difference at a glance. So we get a skill with a guessing game built in for both parties involved, as timer isn't clearly indicated and neither does range. So, because most engagements are rapidly shifting between melee and roughly around 600 range, both players will constantly wonder to what bloody range threshold was it casted at, and whoever guesses right wins. You remember Dragon's Tooth, and that thing was at least bloody consistent. Now we get what's Dragon's Tooth with variable attack timers that are nowhere near well enough indicated not to cause frustration. It's everyone, not just warrior mains, that should be yelling at ArenaNet about this skill. This is not just stupid, this is unhealthy game design pushed to the extremum, and all just because Arena wanted to make it look like they made cool mechanic for warrior, but didn't want to think it through. Arena, the mechanic you made for warrior is just going to make Spear Warrior feel worse to play and worse to fight. And you would know this if you'd put more than 5 minutes of thought behind it. Furthermore, as you may have realized, Spear doesn't really work with majority of Warrior's toolkit. It doesn't have block or ages to synergize with Shieldmaster. It is ranged, so no speed from Warrior's sprint. It has one movement skill that only moves backwards, and Hydrated only knows whether burst is even considered a movement skill or not. There is no weakness or bleeding application for the sake of trait interactions, and not a single boon on entire weapon. So if it isn't working with Forceful Greatsword, it would only synergize with absolute basics, that's CC and burst traits. And there's a merit to think that Land Spear won't synergize with Forceful Greatsword, as that trait still reduces cooldowns of weapon skills, and it would be extremely irresponsible to release a weapon that can be very obnoxious to play against and give it 20% cooldown reaction out of the blue. Speaking of obnoxious, the static evade on Core Burst makes me think of Full Counter and its feature of resetting burst cooldown on hit, as well as Spellbreaker's synergies with CC in general, not to mention, never before seen, consistent quick way of attaching Magebane Tether from outside melee. You must understand, Spear has 900 range on almost everything. Tether will keep you within 600 range or will pull you back. Spellbreaker is only, quote, balanced because it is completely melee or melee adjacent. If you get tethered by a Spear Breaker worth his damned Please tell me Spear Auto wasn't made just for the purpose of a shitty pun. Moving on. Unfortunately or very fortunately, Berserker doesn't seem to be set up for a synergy with Spear whatsoever. The best I can say is there's a small chance Primal Burst will let you fire backwards as you move, as you can with Flaming Flurry. But who the hell knows? They didn't even show that you can move at all with it, so it might root you in place. If it does, we at least know without a shadow of doubt that Arena hates Berserker. Blade Sworn doesn't promise results either, as he doesn't have access to the spammable low cooldown evasion from Burst, and Spear for him is just worse Gunsaber. But who knows, maybe having another bad ranged AoE is somehow going to fix his every problem. Obviously, I'm being sarcastic. In brief summary, the mechanic they put on Warrior Spear is completely irrelevant in PvE and only serves to make Spear more frustrating for everyone in versus modes due to lack of consistency. It has not a single boon, very slim range of possible trait interactions, nothing usable as a mobility option, and it is heavily skewed towards already most annoying warrior spec in PvP. The most optimistic prediction I have for this weapon is that it will be bad enough to never see play, but not as bad so to prompt Arena to buff it. The most pessimistic prediction, however, is that it will end up being so annoying that something will have to get nerfed and they'll give it Dragon Trigger 2 treatment, making the thing painfully unfun to play with, whilst still annoying and oppressive to play against. I'm certain we don't need the beta to point out glaring issues in a design, and from design perspective, Spear already needs a rework. It is plain, boring, its mechanic literally does nothing but fabricates inconsistency, it has nothing going on in terms of boons or conditions, its only mobility can't be used as a mobility tool, and at its strongest, it will be just annoying. It repeats all the mistakes Rifle does, while also bringing few of its own. I can't wait for the beta so I can play Spear Reaper, because if this ends up anything remotely enjoyable to play, that will be the biggest surprise for me this year. Anyway, see you in the beta. Crabface out.